Great. I think we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Alice from Engender. So we are hosting this webinar along with the Young Women's Movement Scotland. And thanks so much for joining us. There's still a few folk trickling in, but we're just going to get started because we've got a lot to pack in. So I'm just going to kick off with a little bit of housekeeping. So if you didn't see the slide at the start, we're obviously doing this by Zoom. I know most folk are familiar with Zoom by now, thanks lockdown, but this is a webinar, so you'll be able to see the panelists, but we can't see you. You're muted and your camera's turned off, so don't worry about that. You can use the chat box, and you can also use the Q&A function to ask questions of the panel. And we'll be able to see them, but other participants won't until we've answered them. But so you can use the chat for technical questions, or if you want to say, yes, that was a brilliant point, or anything like that. No pressure. We have some live captioning happening in this meeting. So thank you to Amanda, who is transcribing for us. So you can access that by clicking on the closed caption box, and you'll find that probably under the little 3 dots and more at the bottom of your screen. And you can select subtitles, or you can see a full transcript, which will appear on the right-hand side of your screen. So please do make use of that as you need. Obviously, we're using the internet, which sometimes fails. If you do get kicked out of the meeting, you should be able to just join again. So just try and join with the same link and the same password. And if that's really not working, you can get us on, drop me an email. You'll have had my detail in the reminder email, or just drop us a tweet, and we will do our best to get you in. We will be recording. We're recording the webinar just for our own records, but we will hope to make it available. But again, don't worry, you won't feature in that recording. So feel free to ask anything you want. Finally, yeah, it's obviously the evening. People have lives, so please don't worry to let kids, cats interrupt. Mine are currently trying to break the door down. If your buzzers go, if you want to eat your dinner in front of the webinar, like I say, we can't see you, so fill your boots. So we have a brilliant panel of speakers today, and the format is going to be, we're just going to hear briefly from our speakers with some short interventions, and then a chance for discussion and chat and questions. And the reason we're here is to talk about the situation for women's equality, women's rights in Poland, but also looking internationally as well. And that's for a number of reasons that these conversations are happening, and lots of folk will have seen the news in the last couple of weeks about the crackdown on women's right to choose in Poland. And obviously that's, again, been a story over the past few years that has gained prominence in the media. But there's also a lot of other things happening in Poland to concern feminists. So we've seen moves to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention, which is the UN Treaty on Violence Against Women. We've seen huge crackdowns on LGBTI rights. We've seen crackdowns on minoritized people, on refugees, and generally a situation which we see echoed in many other countries around the world as well, when the far right gain control. So we just wanted to have a conversation to start off this discussion, to talk about what that means, what can we do here in Scotland, and how it links into some of the struggles that we're fighting in other areas as well. So, like I say, thank you so much for joining, and we're going to get started. So first off, we're going to be hearing from Patrycja, who is the CEO of the Young Women's Movement, which is the national feminist charity for young women leading change. Patrycja has lived in Scotland since 2006, and I'm sure many of you will have read her brilliant blog last week talking about the situation in Poland, and she's going to give us a bit of an intro to what's happening. Over to you, Patrycja.
Thanks, Alice, and thank you for having me. So yeah, this is going to be a bit of context of the kind of political situation in Poland, slightly from an outsider perspective, because I have lived in Scotland for 15 years, or all of my adult life. So Scotland is very much my home, but in a way that only a migrant can understand. Poland is also my home. So it's my childhood home. It's where I took my first steps. It's where I had my first kiss. It's where I met my husband. And we mainly speak Polish at home, or kind of Ponglish, like a mixture of both languages, I guess. And Polish is also the language of my daughter's first words. So Poland is still extremely important to me. But for a long time now, Poland has felt really foreign to me politically. So since 2015, a national conservative and right-wing populist party known as Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, or PiS for short, has held majority governments. The party is well known for the racist, xenophobic, and Islamophobic rhetoric, with the leader of the party, Jarosław Kaczyński, openly claiming that refugees should not be allowed in Poland because they spread infectious diseases, and the interior minister boasting about stopping the Muslim invasion of Europe. The party is also famously against LGBT rights, and this year Poland was ranked the lowest of EU countries by ILGA Europe. With the introduction of so-called LGBT-free zones in many regions of Poland, Jarosław Kaczyński is calling for LGBT people not to be allowed to hold visible positions of authority, such as, for example, being teachers. You might have heard earlier this year the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, calling LGBT not people but ideology. And he also signed a declaration to ban the propagation of LGBT ideology in public institutions. So with all this injustice and discrimination directed at minorities, it was only the matter of time for peace, which ironically translates to Law and Justice Party, to come after the women's rights. The Minister of Education, Przemysław Czarnek, is openly talking about discouraging women from having careers before they fulfill their God-given duty of bearing multiple children, ideally before they turn 30. The party is also against comprehensive sex education, calling it a way to promote pedophilia. And I'll just leave a space for that to sink in. But yeah, it is a fact. I'm as baffled as all of you probably are. They have also proposed a ban on in vitro fertilization, and later suggested that in vitro might only be allowed for married couples, which in Poland means heteronormative couples, and only up to 2 embryos. So it's not a surprise that since 2016, Polish women have been fighting for free access to abortion under the banner of Strajk Kobiet, or Women's Strike movement, who organized a series of Black Monday protests across the country that I'm sure many of you have heard of, and some of you might have even attended the protests here in Scotland. Poland has one of the strictest abortion laws in Europe, and up to last month, abortion was only permitted in 3 cases. 1, when pregnancy was a result of crime, and that's only up to the 12th week. 2, when the pregnancy would put mother's life at risk. And 3, when the fetus had severe disability or was incompatible with life. This so-called abortion compromise, which completely removes the right of abortion due to social reasons, with no provisions made in regard to respect of body autonomy of a pregnant person who simply does not want to carry on with the pregnancy, has been law in Poland since 1993. In 1996, access to abortion has been further limited by allowing doctors the right to moral objection to abortion, giving them freedom to refuse an otherwise legal treatment based on their religious beliefs. In many cases, this also extends to the morning after pill, which, while legal, is increasingly difficult to purchase in Poland. So on 22nd of October this year, the Constitutional Tribunal ruled that the third instance, fetal malformation, is unconstitutional. And with 98% of abortions in Poland falling into this category, it effectively banned all legal abortions. The country has been on fire since then. Every city is protesting, from the smallest cities, villages, big cities. You probably have seen pictures of people going to streets to fight this ruling, and also in the middle of pandemic. So people are literally risking their lives to protest this ruling. And the message that women are sending to peace is clear: wypierdalać, which roughly translates to get the fuck out. If this ruling is implemented, and the Polish government is now delaying making these decisions, this decision, thanks to the largest protest since the fall of communism, Polish women will be required by law to act as biological coffins for fetuses who will die as soon as they are born. So let the horror of this sink in. As a woman, as a Pole, as a mother, there is only one word that I can use to describe this, and it is torture.
Thank you so much, Patrycja, for sharing that really really powerful and also really useful overview of how we got to where we are now. And you mentioned there protests, and I'm sure lots of folk watching will have seen footage of that. So we're going to hear now from Zawadzka, who is a feminist and migrant rights activist. In her day job, she works at Zero Tolerance, but she's speaking here in a personal capacity and has until very recently been in Poland and is going to talk a little bit about how things feel on the ground there. Over to you, Jo.
Hello, thanks very much for a nice introduction, and thank you, Patrycja, for giving us an overview. It is truly tragic what is happening in Poland, but I would like to go back a little bit to give you a bit more context about how we ended where we are before I talk about what's happening in Poland, because in 1956, Poland had a quite reasonable abortion law for that time. Things started to change slowly once the politicians started to make a pact with the Catholic Church to stay in power. And this relationship between Poland and the Catholic Church, well, Polish politicians of various fractions and the Catholic Church, was only getting stronger and stronger. It was believed that the only values and the cultural code of Poland is dictated by the Catholic values. And politicians kind of made a pact with Catholic Church, and this restriction of women's rights started gradually in 1993, but only progressed because one man's obsession with power. And here I'm talking about the leader of Law and Justice Party, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość Party, Lech Kaczyński, and obviously the rise of far right and in Europe, across Europe and across the world. So what we are observing at the moment in the UK with Brexit, in the United States with Trump, well, no longer Trump, thankfully, and in Poland as a consequence of the whole world shifting to the right. Luckily, what we've seen in Poland in terms of a response in defense of women's rights and in defense of LGBTQ rights is promising. I lived until Saturday. I'm from a very small, well, not very small, but reasonably small town in Poland. It's only 200,000 people. I have never seen so many people on the streets. I have never seen such a consistent kind of message that was sent to the government. Wypierdalać. Every day over the last 2 weeks, there was solidarity actions. If for people who couldn't participate, they joined online, they made signage, they supported the protest in any way they could. What we haven't seen on such a mass scale is the amount of young people on the streets. And to some extent, I think we saw more people because obviously older people were worried to go out and to be on the streets. So obviously the participation of older people was a little less. But the participation on such a massive scale of young people, for me, is the evidence that our civic society is being born, and that young people know that this fight is not only about abortion. This fight is about their freedom. And to conclude, I wanted to say that what we witnessed in Poland is finally a sign of the end of the cultural hegemony of the church, and the end of some political era. I mean, where it will all come to fruition, we don't know, because the elections are still quite far away. But we do know that people in Poland do not agree for the church to make decisions about the most intimate areas of their lives, and that this choice should be left to individuals.
Thank you so much, Jo. There's already so many things I want to revisit when we get to the discussion part. So for folk listening as well, do feel free to pop questions in the Q&A, or just be thinking if there's anything you want to contribute or ask. Next up, we're going to hear from Martyna Kampa. Martyna's from the Edinburgh Queer Collective and Polish Women Strike Scotland, and is going to talk a little bit more on some of those themes Jo talked about solidarity and what we can do. Martyna.
Hello, everyone. As Edinburgh Queer Collective, we started organizing in Scotland around midsummer 2020 regarding the protest when the Margot queer activists in Poland got arrested, unjustly arrested, for putting a flag on a monument, which was the part of obviously political action of the Peace Party to suppress queer people in Poland, and also kind of win the presidential elections back then, because that was the biggest issue. We just started as a group of friends, and I'm telling that as a person who had some little background in activism beforehand in Krakow in 2014 to 2016, but it was never as a response to unjust treatment by the government. That was usually just prides and, celebratory action. This time we met and started a collective mostly to take care about each other, to take care about our, Polish people in Scotland, to just be in contact with each other, support each other, and give a helping hand when someone's like really depressed when hearing news from Poland. We started with 3 protests, which were quite successful and had a quite nice turnout, but what we weren't expecting was what the government had in place for us right now. The first protest regarding the Constitutional Tribunal's decision about banning abortion was actually 1 week before the decision itself, and it didn't have huge turnout, and we kind of thought that it's just something we're passionate about, and mostly we had the local activists, local news outlets, and friends of the collective, but we weren't expecting what's going to happen on the 22nd, when the moment that the Constitutional Tribunal signed that decision, everyone took it to the streets in Poland, and everyone kept asking us, are we joining here? And we cannot stay compliant. That's usually what we had. We cannot just stay compliant, because you would think, like, what can you do from Scotland for Polish people? And why are you organizing here? That's usually what we hear from Polish people, not Scottish, actually. But I love to answer that decision. When I was an activist in Krakow, most of my work, of organizing work, was sitting in my room in front of my laptop. Right now, I'm still sitting in my room in front of my laptop. The part where my room actually is, it's second or even third matter at this point. We were so glad to see how many people actually answered to our protests, first under the Polish consulate, and then another by the Scottish Parliament on Holyrood Hill. We also, and I believe Eva's going to talk more about that, tried to focus not only on, letting go of the energy of the crowd and giving a platform to people to speak, which were obviously our priorities, but we wanted to focus this energy, towards specific way, and organize some lobbying action, and most of all, just bring attention to the issue. The biggest power we really have right now, by being here and not in Poland, is the different currency. And let's be honest about that. Crowdfunding here works bit easier than crowdfunding in Poland right now. There is a pandemic. People don't have money to spend. People run out of their savings. People have very difficult situation at their work very often. And we weren't expecting to, you know, crowdfund too much. But when you start counting how many ways you can raise the money for people in Poland, how many ways you can raise the platform and, you know, boost their views, boost their likes, which for us just seems like that's just Facebook. For them, that's a platform they can speak from, that's a platform they can be heard from. And also the money is not only going for their private matters. Right now, we're very confident that most of that is going to go towards the legal issues and legal action being taken by the associations and foundations in Poland, as well as direct action help to actual pregnant women that were being kicked out of the hospitals the second the decision was landed. So we're trying to organize how we can. Protest is one thing. Right now with the COVID restrictions, obviously we cannot go back to that. We were trying to keep as much social distancing, masks, you know, sanitizers and everything. But when it's 700 people by the Parliament Square, you just cannot keep up with that and you have to change your ways. And we're trying to organize people locally, but also across Scotland, people who are very much engaged in the protests to do their thing. And right now, for example, one of our little actions, you would think it's such a silly thing. We just printed out postcards with local art. Some artists reach out to us with art mostly connected to the issues right now, to the issues about abortion and the ban, and shared their amazing, amazing designs with us so we could print it out and sell it for donations. Obviously, as a not legal, because we don't have an association or a foundation, we're just like an official collective. We're not trying to get any money. We're just sending people straight to the links in Poland. And it seems to be working really good at this time. A lot of people were engaged, not only Edinburgh, because you might think it's just Edinburgh due to the name. Most of all, Glasgow, amazing attendance and amazing energy. People that really kick ass, and I have to say that. Protests in cities like Inverness and Perth and Kirkcaldy and all over the country just let us know that this help was actually needed and people want to speak out not only in Poland but across the world.
Amazing, thank you, Martyna, and thanks to everyone who attended and who donated when you signed up. All of those donations will be headed to the organisation in Poland that there was information about on the booking link, and we'll send out as well after the webinar. So next we're going to hear from Ava McKee, who's a journalist and activist who's been living between Scotland and Poland for the last 17 years. She's been involved in Women's Strike, and her specialities are in human rights and Scottish and Polish politics. Ava.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. So my colleague said a lot about the situation, so I will be not telling too much about what happened just now in Poland or what is the situation. I think that it's important only to add that comparing to legal abortions, for example, in 2019, where was 1,110 legal abortion in Poland, there is counted that illegal abortion was around 100,000. So it is this scale, and we said about this scale. Poland doesn't have problem with women's rights and human rights from now. Yes, it is the long-lasting process, and 2016 when was, let's say, established movement women's strike. The women's strike try to prepare itself very good to this fight, because we say that it's war. It's war. We are just now during the war. It was said a lot of the legal initiatives, and the strike tries to be very well prepared to the long legal battle. What happens just now, frankly speaking, the scale of these protests, it's also surprising for us. We didn't expect that it will be so huge response. Of course, we are, we aren't happy that we have to fight about women's rights. We are happy that we have so big response and so many people are engaged in this action. According to Scotland, Women's Strike Scotland is quite new baby because we had the Women's Strike UK, but in response to the last situation, the people start looking on Facebook where are the protests, what we can do, how we can join, how we can help, and there was no really the information about what happens in Scotland. So we decided to set the Facebook website Women's Strike in Scotland. We are focused and in general together with Edinburgh Queer Collective, we are focused on the 3 areas. So first it is we want to give the full support, solidarity and support to Polish women. And it's mostly through the protest every day, and we invite everybody who has time and live in Edinburgh for the short walk in the evening to make the beautiful decoration around the Polish consulate. It happens every day and it looks really lovely. The second way how we support, so it is awareness of the situation. It is awareness, but also through this awareness, we set through the politicians, and we want to make the pressure for the Polish government, for the Polish so let's say, I don't want to say Catholic Church, but government, yes, and authorities about that they are not so expanded and not so brave to take the next steps in making the troubles and make our situation even worse. We said the motion in Scottish Parliament, so the Scottish Parliament said the motion, we were lobbying for it, and it's a really very big success because they very clear said that what happens just now in Polish, it is against human rights, not only women's rights, but it is the action against the human rights. We send the letters to all MPs and FSPs about the situation, what happens. We have quite good response, so it is like the base for the next steps and cooperation. The third area is the help with mostly with support, with money. So we need the money. We need the money for the organization who helps helps the women in Poland to travel abroad to make abortion. We need the money for organization who make awareness about what is abortion, when the women can get any help and any support in this situation. Also, what is very important from our point of view, it is to help to change the situation in Scotland with access for non-residents for the abortion for termination. It's very interesting because the same law is in the whole UK, but because I try to make it very fast because I see that my time is going to the end. But shortly, that in Scotland, abortion is provided through the NHS and based on the residency in Scotland. And it's quite confusing for people because the law and the act is the same in whole England, but in whole UK. But what the abortion is provided in England through the private clinics, what is much where are much more open for paying treatment for no resident women. The cost of abortion for not residents in UK, it is from 450 to over mostly £1,500. So it's quite costly. We don't add, we have to add also the cost of traveling, accommodation. So this fundraising money it's very important as well. So any support from the women's organization, from the people in Scotland, to make the pressure, to make the push, to make awareness about changing the procedure, changing how the non-residents women and not only women can get the treatment in Scotland is more than welcome. It's our goal, and we will be taking the next step to move it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ava. I think there's, I put a link to that motion in the chat, so do have a little shifty, see if your MSP has signed it. We'll be talking a little bit more about that at the end as well. I think all of our speakers so far have mentioned that this is not something that happened overnight, and the need for vigilance, and it's also not something that is restricted to one country. So Ava talked there about Scotland's access to abortion, which is still technically criminalised, which there's still lots of work to do here in Scotland and here in the UK, but also this is part of a worldwide struggle with women fighting for bodily autonomy and reproductive rights around the world. And our last speaker is Naomi Connor. Naomi is the co-convener of Alliance for Choice, which is the campaign for access to free, safe, legal abortion in a stigma-free climate to ensure that every woman and pregnant person can access abortion healthcare according to their own needs. And their focus is abortion rights across the island of Ireland. Naomi is also someone who has been forced to travel to England to access their own abortion care, feeding into some of the things Ava there was talking about, the burden on women seeking to access abortion. Naomi, over to you.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I want to do is offer my solidarity and that of Alliance for Choice to our sisters and siblings in Poland. And I think it's fair to say that we know what you're going through, and everything that we've seen so far, everything that we've supported so far has absolutely been the right thing to do. I don't want to, I'm certainly not going to patronize anyone, but I maybe just want to talk a little bit about the situation in Northern Ireland. And I also want to offer, I suppose, some hope, because optimism is also an act of political courage. And you have to act, as Angela Davis said, as if you're going to change the world, and as if you can do it all the time. And I think that's the thing, that keeps us going. So in Northern Ireland, abortion was decriminalised in October 2019, and at the same time, equal marriage was legalised. So at the minute, a lot of people think it's a job done in Northern Ireland, but that is not the case. And in Alliance for Choice, I suppose we're not naive by any stretch, but we thought we would be maybe battling some of the stigma and working on some of the long-term obstacles to abortion, but unfortunately we're not. We do have regressive right-wing forces in Northern Ireland, and that comes in the form mainly, though not exclusively, I have to say, of the Democratic Unionist Party, who are a right-wing party and who are very conservative, who are homophobic, who are anti-women, who are, neoliberal, party who are very problematic, but they are the biggest party in Northern Ireland. That said, there are lots of political parties who have come on a journey and who are much more supportive, and that was hugely helped by the repeal movement in the south of Ireland, and that gave us much momentum. So at the minute, whilst abortion in Northern Ireland is decriminalised, we are facing a new obstacle in the form of obstruction. So the Health Minister for Northern Ireland, who strangely isn't DUP, he's Ulster Unionist, who are supposed to be a bit more progressive and a bit more liberal, is vehemently anti-choice. So the decision to commission abortion services through the health service, he is consistently refusing to do. So what that means is trusts, hospitals have to provide the services themselves. They have to fund it themselves. All of this, of course, is compounded by a pandemic. They have to fund it themselves. They have to provide it themselves. The health minister will not put any public information out on abortion provision and services. He simply refuses to do it. So that creates a whole myriad of problems for women and pregnant people who need to access abortion care. And even though we have CEDAW legislation, the reality is we really only have abortion by way of early medical abortion up to 9 weeks, 6 days for the majority of women and pregnant people, but not all. And of course, it's the people, it's the migrant women, it's the LGBT community, it's people with disabilities, it's young people who find it more difficult to access, and who always have found it more difficult to access. So there are some of the problems that we're encountering at the minute. What we've done in order, and I mean, things happen pretty quickly for us in Northern Ireland, but that's not to say that it didn't take decades and decades of work to bring about. Of course it did, but in an almost a kind of an unbelievable period of time of a few months, it really, really intensified from a rights-based view. And we got the legislation from Westminster that we needed, but what we didn't get was the access that we require, and that's what we're now entrenched in. Just very quickly, I'll say what we've moved to. We've moved in Alliance for Choice from a rights-based model to a justice-based model, and we think that that's critical because I suppose in doing that, we reflected a lot on what I suppose what feminists have always done. You know, we speak as secular feminists, and I think one of the things we reflected a lot on Audre Lorde, and the fact that she states that the master isn't going to dismantle his own house. The master's tools are not going to dismantle the master's house. So one of the things that we amplified was the voices of women and pregnant people through storytelling, through In Her Shoes, through My Body, My Life, through Doctors for Choice, and we created lots of spaces and lots of platform, because the reality is the patriarchy, the institutions don't know what to do when a woman who's been refused an abortion or has had an abortion speaks out. They don't know what to do with it. They can't deny it. It's there, it's real, it's actual, and people start to identify with that. So people start to say, that sounds like my mother, that sounds like my sister, that sounds like my daughter. And that's the thing that really started to break down those barriers. So amplifying those voices, putting those platforms, creating them wherever we could, was the seed change. That was a real game changer for us in Northern Ireland. And arts and culture played a huge part as well, because we were able to reach an audience that wouldn't come to a protest, that wouldn't come to a rally. That had a reach, that was getting people into rooms that ordinarily we wouldn't have got into rooms as activists, who wouldn't have read the leaflets. So that was huge for us as well. And of course, one of the things that we did was direct assistance. So in Alliance for Choice, we had been providing pills to women, for long before it was decriminalised, and that is critical and that is crucial, and that built our activist base for us. But other things that we've done is abortion and faith, abortion and disability projects, because the reality is there's a stereotype out there that there are women who have abortions and women who don't. And these are the same people, just at different points in their lives. So breaking down those stereotypes was really, really something that was crucial to the campaign for abortion justice and reproductive justice in Northern Ireland. We've come a long way. We're certainly not there yet, by any means. We're probably in a different place than we thought we would be. But until every pregnant person can access the abortion health care they need, we will be driven, and we won't stop.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It is brilliant always to be reminded of the situation for women across the UK and in Ireland, but also, to get a little bit of optimism, which has been hard to find this year, certainly, and also to hear about so many of the crossovers there. Both Naomi and Martyna talked about the power of arts to bring people together and to get people inspired, the links with other forms of injustice, like supporting disabled people, like queer solidarity in the movement.